This is 97 slides. I'm not going to get over 97 slides in the time we have allotted. You guys have this document. You have this recording. And you don't have to ask me to use it however you like. I'm going to spend most of my time today looking at the graphs because the graphs always tell a better story. There's a couple of tables that I'm going to focus on, especially with the number of graduate students, given the makeup of this group. But mostly I'm going to skip over stuff, but you guys have the document and you just have to trust me that I'm going to go to where I think we should be going. So let me start off. I've been waiting to do an Ivy League school for a long time. I did go to Penn 100 years ago, but I did go to an Ivy League school many years ago, and I certainly understand it all. And it just boggles my mind that a place like Columbia is crying poverty. It just boggles my mind that they do that. But okay, let's go. I've done over 100 of these now over the last 15 years or so. So from everything from community college to public, private, everything, big, small, everything in between. And a couple of themes are universal, but very few have a AAA bond rating. University of Michigan, I teach at Eastern Michigan. We live in Ann Arbor, but I teach at Eastern Michigan. And the graduate students are still on strike at University of Michigan. I don't know if you guys are aware of that, if the postdocs are aware that the grad students at Michigan are on strike. Obviously different issues, different unions, but certainly similar things they're facing. University of Michigan also has a AAA bond rating, and they're also crying poverty. And the reason for the AAA bond rating, the reserves they have and the cash flows they generate are tremendous every year. And down here, graduate teaching assistants and part-time faculty are the majority of the people who teach the classes at Columbia. So I know a lot of the postdocs are doing a lot of research, but there's also people out there doing a lot of teaching. And I'm sure there's a lot of people on this call who are paid to teach at Columbia who are both faculty and classified as graduate students as well. So here we go. So this is the balance sheet. I'm not going to make overall conclusions from what I see here, but the red line is liabilities, not all debt, as we'll see. The blue line are assets, not all the endowment, but a lot of it. And the green line is the difference between the red and the blue and the red. And some of that, as we'll see. So this is about 23 billion. This is about 5. This is about 18. And the question we're going to answer pretty soon is how much of that 18 billion, B, not me, not M, B, 18 billion represents true reserves of the institution. So they did borrow some money recently. And when a university says the reason they're borrowing the money is to finance various construction and renovation projects and general corporate purposes, not the most revealing, but that's what they put in their audited statements, and that's what's in the bond statement as well. So they're not really telling us what they're doing. This is the total assets over time. The green, cash and investments, most of the endowment. The orange, the buildings, etc. Institution real estate, places like Chicago and Columbia have become little real estate empires on top of becoming universities. And things are, generally, you can see growth. The decline here is because of the decline in the stock market from 21 to 22. So let's spend a little time looking at the endowment. And you could see the total investments. The endowment is about 13.2 billion. My cursor is here. Total, there's another $1 billion of investments outside of the endowment. And there's $750,000 of cash laying around. So about $15 billion in cash when all is said and done. But things went up a lot in 20 to 21 and went down as the market went down. Just get a picture here. This is where Columbia invests its money. They got about $15 billion or so that they're investing. And you can see the vast majority are in what we call net asset value. If I could bring sports into it, I don't know how many of you guys are Met fans, but the owner of the New York Mets is Stevie Cohen. Stevie Cohen is a hedge fund manager. He manages this kind of money. That's where Columbia keeps most of their money, with hedge fund managers or people that manage risk and put the money in the riskiest securities because they claim it's going to generate the highest returns. Level one, stocks, bonds, mutual funds. What we put our money in, we meaning you, myself, what we put our money in our individual retirement accounts. You could see the vast majority of Columbia's portfolio was here. Now, it jumped up a lot in 21, went down in 22. We're going to see whether this investing works. And here I just describe what these things are. And so I'm just going to skip and go to the pictures. So what I have here is how has Columbia done versus the S&P? Now, a couple of things. The S&P is a Standard & Poor's. S&P 500, how do they do? The university administration will, as I write up here, will not agree the S&P is a valid benchmark. Why not? They like to view the benchmarks as how did the other universities that we consider our peers, how did they do in investing? That's that benchmark. To me, if you can't beat the market, you've got $10, $15 billion. If you gave any of us $10 to $15 billion, I think I'd try to beat the market, or at least what I would do, just equal the market. Well, in the light blue line, the light blue boxes are Columbia. Those are your colors, as I recall. And the darker ones are the market. And 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21, the S&P 500 had a higher return than the Columbia Endowment. In 22, it flipped. Both were negative. Columbia was less negative than the S&P as a whole. And what I write at the bottom here, try a plain vanilla. Plain vanilla fund is a Vanguard Fidelity 500 fund, something that mirrors the market. That's what a plain vanilla fund would be. Why doesn't Columbia do that? There's a lot of reasons for it. Some people, the cynical reason is there must be financial people who are on the board of trustees who recommend investing in these kind of securities. I think there's some truth to that. There's the belief that we have to hire people to run this thing because there's a lot of money involved, and these people are professionals. They know what they're doing. Well, I'm not so sure it's working. In fact, as you can see here, over this 6-year period, 7-year period, the average return for Columbia was 6.4%. The average return for the S&P was 10%. So take that for what it's worth. Now, this slide reports, I know I'm going to try to be not that heavy on the numbers. This is the percent of the expenses of Columbia that the endowment covers. So in 22, Columbia spent about $5.5 billion on everything. That's paying people, cutting the lawn, keeping the lights on, everything. And about 12%. Sorry, about 12% of that, or 1/8 of that, is covered by the endowment. And within the endowment itself, you could see in the last 2 years, just under 5% of the endowment is spent, and in years prior, between 5 and 6% was spent. So two different aspects of the endowment. And my goal here, as I saw, you guys are in the middle of bargaining, and the AAUP chapter certainly wants to know what's going on. My goal here is to inform you about everything financial there is to know about the university which you all work at. And I think understanding this, about 1 out of $8 that expend is covered by the endowment, not the whole thing, 1 of 8. Within your peer institutions, places like Harvard is going to be a little higher. There are other places in the Ivy League where it's a little lower. But generally for a private school, this is still very high to have that much covered by the endowment, which is a good thing, of course. And this kind of spending is pretty typical, about 5% of the endowment being spent every year. Okay. Transparency. The IRS 990, my prediction is most of the people on this call, there's about 100 of you, have looked at the 990 for one reason. You want to see how much those people are getting paid, because it tells us the compensation of the highest employees. So here's the deal with transparency. So the IRS 990, Columbia has a fiscal year end of 6/30. We do not have access to the 6/30/2021 or the 6/30/2022 IRS 990s. There are several different websites that we use. There's an IRS search tool, there's ProPublica, there's GuideStar, and there's Columbia website. The Columbia website has nothing. There is no 990 on the Columbia website, which is beyond my comprehension that that's not the case, but that's just the way it is. These other places are slower than they would be, than they should be. And you could see the fiscal year ended 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, that was due to the IRS definitively on 5/15/2022, almost 1 year ago. We still don't see it. The administration has it. The Board of Trustees has seen it. The one for the year ended 6/30/22 is due in 13 days. They may have done it by now. My guess is they've done it. Maybe they submitted it or they're about to submit it. So proposal, the Columbia administration should make the IRS 990 available to the campus community as soon as they submit it to the IRS. What's wrong with that? That sounds, doesn't, Columbia is where information goes to die. I appreciate that. That's unfortunate. That's the case, but maybe true. And I don't see anything wrong with sharing. This is not, as I write down here, this document is not a national security secret. It will be made public. We will eventually get it, but why do we have to wait a couple years to do so? So that's my view on that. All right, let's look at the reserves. So again, I'm sorry to bother you with a couple of numbers here, but remember, $18 billion. The net assets, I'm going to use the chat if you don't mind. The net assets are the total assets minus the total liabilities. How much of those total net assets of $18 billion are true reserves? That's what we're going to answer now. How much do they really have in reserves? And when you go through it, there's two categories in the financial statements. With donor restrictions, that means someone has given money to Columbia and said, you cannot spend the principal ever. You're not allowed to touch it. And then without donor restrictions, you can see there's about $8 billion of that. So what we consider reserves is we don't consider a single dime of anything restricted by donors as a reserve. Not a single dime is considered reserves at all. Totally off the table. The rest of the stuff, Columbia puts it into two categories: board designated endowment and undesignated. Even the admin at Columbia would agree that undesignated counts. What they will say about this first category, board designated, is that's already spoken for. It's in the departments. It's uptown, or it's in Morningside Heights, or it's at the medical center. That's just where that is up to them. But the auditors, the external auditors, would not put this $4.3 billion in the category named without donor restrictions if the board did not have the ability to change their minds or spend that money any way they wanted. So the bottom line is Columbia has $8.3 billion of reserves. And you can see this is what it looks like over time, just about what they had in 21 and the highest they've had ever. That's 8 with a B, not M, 8 with a B. So I heard from the postdoc union. I heard Lauren, I heard you say there was discussion of the retirement contribution that was delayed due to the pandemic. I don't know the exact dollars. I don't know the exact numbers of your bargaining unit, but my guess is that the amount of retirement contribution that was withheld from your members during the pandemic is a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of this $18 billion. My guess is it may not even be 1% of it. I don't even think it is. I just can't imagine it's anything close to even 0.1%, maybe. It's just nothing to them. And I'm sorry to give you this advice, but that withholding of the retirement contribution, one, was done because they thought they could get away with it because everyone else is doing it. And two, now it's just power. To me, it's not about the money. They could easily, faculty contributions were cut for 6 months. Yeah. If we take all the money of the contributions of everyone who was money taken away, it's just money. It's nothing. It's nothing to them. It is absolutely nothing to them. In terms of money, it's couch cushion money. And I'm not being facetious or flippant. It is couch cushion money to them. But It's also power. And I'm not accusing anyone of bad motives. I'm not accusing anyone of lying or hiding. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is the money that was withheld is so small compared to what they have that they could easily give this back and they wouldn't even notice. And the reason they're not is not because financially they can't afford to, it's because of power. That's why they can't. So, and yeah, I also think what was written just now, a certain kind of precedent, admitting it would be an admission of a mistake, but I don't view it that way. I don't think it would be an admission of a mistake. I think it would be, you know what, the pandemic was crazy. No one knew what was going on. Now we've looked at it and we realize, we've got that $8 billion of reserves, and this is only going to cost us a couple $100,000. So let's do the right thing by our employees. And we realize we take money away from people in their retirement that has not just the money they get now, it really affects long-term in a significant manner. So let's restore that money to their retirement accounts. Let's do the right thing. That's the way I would view it. Again, I'm not saying the administration is evil people. I don't believe that. That I don't believe. I think they're just misguided, and they don't want to admit a mistake. Plus, they like showing you guys who's in charge. So that's my view on that. In terms of the level of reserves, is this $8 billion a lot of money? Well, we compare it. We create something called a primary reserve ratio, which is the reserves, $8 billion, over the annual expenses, about $5.5 billion. That gets me my 151.6%. You can see I kind of lay it out there. Columbia has 18 months of expenses in reserve. Anything more than 6 is considered high. They've got way more reserves than they know what to do with. That's the bottom line. Now, I'm not saying the reserves are a pot of cash sitting in the president's office or sitting on the ground somewhere being hidden. No, they have the funds. They just choose not to tap into them or claim they don't have them or claim they don't have access to them. And we'll get into that in a bit. So level reserves compared to debt, you can see reserves going up to debt level, not very high compared to reserves. One of the reasons why the reserves are going up every year is this, operating cash flows. And you can see what I have in the text box on the right. Operating cash flows is the total cash in minus the total cash out. That means all the cash in from grants, contracts, tuition revenue, housing, dining, basketball tickets, everything, minus all the cash out. Number one cash out is obviously paying people. And they're taking in every year, good, bad, whatever, every year. And the best year they had was 2022, where they took in $911 million more than they spent. $911 million. That's not that. This isn't thousand. That's $911 million. That's $911,911 million. And look, you guys don't have to take my advice about bargaining. I've certainly been on a lot of bargaining tables, been with grad students, been with a lot of different groups at the table, at different tables, at different places. I like to highlight your excess cash flows administration versus what we're asking for. We're asking for such a small piece of this in terms of what we're requesting at the table in terms of, and I saw the list you had put up with the things that you highlighted. Some of those were obviously non-monetary, and which are very important, of course, and some were monetary. But costing them out, I'm not saying that you think I don't take this the wrong way, but those demands are not getting to $911 million. Again, they're a small fraction of it. So they certainly have the resources. This graph is looking at, I'm an accounting professor, and you guys are not. You're smart people. I'm not about to teach you an accounting class, but there's 2 different measures of how did Columbia do, taking in more than they spent. The green is just on a pure cash basis. The purple is what we call accrual method. And accrual method includes revenues and expenses when incurred, not necessarily paid in cash. And it includes some non-cash items like depreciation expense, which I write down, which is an estimated wear and tear in the buildings. And you heard about that dreaded deferred maintenance, that kind of stuff is kind of part of that. Anyway, these two constructs are very strong, and along with the solid reserves and AAA bond rating, they should put the rest of the need for any austerity measures of budget cuts. There's no way Columbia should be cutting anything in terms of their budget. I'm not saying they could just spend whatever they want, but budget cuts, no, I'm just not seeing it. It's just not there. It's just not there. So, all right. Bond rating, AAA bond rating affirmed. Look at the date, March 31st, 2023. That's pretty recent. Stable outlook. There's the and prestigious reputation. Outside wealth and scale. Those are reserves I just talked about. Low financial leverage, low debt. Demand, donor support, research. And the administration is good. It says disciplined financial management contributes to consistently favorable operating results. The administration can say, well, the only reason we're doing so well is because we run the place, we run such a tight ship. Well, I'm not so sure that's true, but remember, when Moody's puts out these reports, who do they talk to? They talk to the admin, and well, there you go. So I'll just leave it at that. And things are looking really good. And here's, if you think everyone's got a AAA bond rating, no, that's not true. You can see this is public and private, of course, but not everyone has a AAA bond rating. Okay, let's talk. This is kind of what the administration will claim. Yes, Columbia has a AAA bond rating, but this reflects just our ability to pay off debt. It's not a reflection of financial situation. It's confirmation, and the reality, it's confirmation from the outside that Columbia isn't really in an excellent financial position. The admin will say, well, every Ivy League school has a AAA rating, so it's not a big deal that Columbia has one. Well, Brown, Cornell, and Penn don't have AAA ratings. And it's not common at all for institutions that have AAA ratings. Next, what really matters is our budget going forward, leading to deficits unless significant cuts are made. I'm talking, this is what the administration is going to say. The past statements do not reflect the true financial condition of Columbia. My answer to that is, and I'm sorry to use bad language here, I'm not going to say it, but the word budgets starts with B and ends with S. These budgets are projections only by the administration. They're not audited. They exclude whatever they want from revenue. They count capital costs. They count contingencies, whatever that means. And they get overly pessimistic. It's their prediction on where things are going. They could say anything they want in their budget. Anything they want. The audited financial statements tell us what actually happened, and the bond rating is outside confirmation of how well they're doing. Lastly, these reserves are not free to use at all, and they're restricted by donors, and they can only be used by the departments. And as I said before, not one single dollar of donor restricted funds are part of reserves that we report. As for reserves being stuck in the departments, if there was no discretion over these funds, the external auditors would not put those funds in the category named without donor restrictions. So, okay, let's look at the revenues. Go to the graphs. First, total revenues, up, huge increase. In 22, it's $5.8 billion in total revenue, and we'll look at that. Look at why. Well, this graph, we have both the medical facility, the medical plan and the hospital, et cetera, everything along with that obviously has a lot to do with what's going on. At U of M, University of Michigan, the administration always says, well, the hospital is driving everything. The hospital drives everything, and because the hospital money is separate, we can't drive anything. Well, first of all, the hospital is part of the whole university as it is here. And secondly, it's not driving everything. You could see tuition is certainly going up. Government grants, the administration will claim, well, the only reason these government grants went up was because of federal HERF money, federal higher education relief fund money. Well, most of this is not that. Most of this is the grants that researchers are writing and that many of the postdocs are working on. That's what this grant revenue is. The administration will also point to, oh my God, the pandemic really hurt us because all the students had to move out of the dorms. Auxiliaries, and I'll put this in the chat. Auxiliaries is housing, dining, not doing, but dining, student union, bookstore, parking, and some centers, if you have any centers that bring money, that kind of stuff. You can see it's not that huge a deal in terms of the overall picture. You can see the decline right there. That's the pandemic-related decline. Well, that decline there is, when you look at the context of this graph, it's really not that big a deal. And what I do here is create a revenue distribution for the most recent year with the medical system and without the medical revenue involved. So with the medical revenue involved, medical's 25% roughly, tuition's 25%, government grants 20%. Really a nice, don't have to put your eggs in any one basket. Take out medical, tuition goes to about a third, government grants 28, investment income about the same either way, and auxiliaries less than 5%. I found this less than 5%. Sorry about the watch thing. Okay, so I look at the changes. I'm looking at the changes in the different items. And so let's again just go to the graph. And so this is 16 to 19 kind of pre-pandemic, and then 19 to 20 from the pandemic till the most recent year we have data. And you can see the three main revenue sources all did very well before and after. Investment income, this drop is in 21 to 22. That's generating this. But the main revenue sources are all doing very well, which is nice to see. All right, let's talk enrollment. The very good news, and we had enrollment, you can see I'm using two different revenue sources. This first revenue source is the bond website that Columbia reports data to the bond agencies, and OPIR is the Office of Planning and Institutional Research at Columbia. So this is Columbia's data. Everyone thinks this is my data. I report what the administration reports. So anyway, so we got undergraduate, graduate professional, medical center, and global programs, number of students. You can see, and we'll see this when we look at the Ivy peers and the other peers, Columbia is much more heavily weighted towards grad students than the peer institutions. 60% of the students are grad students. The good news is generally the total bar is going up over time. And this is the total graphically. You could see we had a decline around the pandemic, and then things have taken off since then. 2023 is fall 2022, the year that's going to end June 30th, 2023. So you can see how many students there are here now. Let's look at the changes. Excuse me. So these are the changes in the number of changes. I go kind of pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, and then total. So undergraduate, nice increases. The biggest increases are in graduate and professional. Well, they're a bigger part of the base here. So someone writes, we definitely need a union. Non-tenure track faculty definitely need a union. Non-tenure track faculty certainly can unionize, and they are at certain places, though it's not easy to get recognized, not easy to organize. And certainly, I hope you guys, if you do unionize, talk to me. We'd love you to consider the AAUP as your bargaining agent. Since you guys brought that up, I'm gonna say that. I don't get paid anything else if you guys join. You guys look at other unions. I understand there's a lot of other unions out there, but we certainly would love to represent you guys if you guys are thinking of doing that. So, okay. So very strong picture on enrollment. I did enrollment by college here. I know if I'm you sitting there watching all these numbers and all these graphs, I want to find where I'm at. Let me find my college and see how my college is done. From where I sit, it's one university, even though different campuses, undergrad, grad, postdocs versus non-tenure track, tenure track, all different. Everyone's different, but you're really all one. You really are one place. I highlighted a couple of ones here. Obviously, I saw engineering as the biggest increase over time, but there are others. Professional studies has a big increase as well, that have increased significantly over time. This data is not included. I want to say this to include that one college is better or more important than another, or that one college is a cash cow. You hear that phrase all the time. This data is just information that members I think you could be interested in, just to have it so you know where your college is and where things are going. That's all this is for. And you can see I got it from the Office of Planning and Institutional Research at Columbia. The acceptance rate, don't worry, you're taking nobody. You're still taking like 3 people, and that's it. No one else is allowed in, according to this. So anyway, tuition, it costs $81,000. Sticker price. I admit, no, not everyone pays that. We can discount it in a second. $81,000 tuition room board to go to Columbia right now. Wow. That's a lot of money. So these are the changes in tuition only undergrad versus the average of the biggest graduate programs. And you can see these things are going up. 1 year, the undergrad programs basically stayed flat, went down a little. But in general, we're looking at 3-4% increases in tuition every year. 3%. They have a profit, that's for sure. All right. This is the change in price over the long term, from 16 to 23. This is the 7-year or so increase in tuition for the different programs that we have here. And you can see they're all pretty significant. Discount rate. The administration is going to say that there was just an article last week in Inside Higher Ed and the Chronicle. I read the Chronicle, it is admin based, but we still got to read it. But in both the Chronicle and Inside Higher Ed, the national discount rate for private universities is now 50%. Now, why is Columbia so much lower? The biggest reason that you're so much lower is you're so heavily involved with grad students, and grad students, they don't tend to get the breaks on tuition. A lot of grad students still have to pay tuition. Even if you work, you still have to pay your tuition. And universities tend not to give graduate students that big a break on tuition that they do undergrads. But still, this is the total tuition that they took in. The sticker price in 2022 was about $2 billion and about $500 million in grants. That's where you get the 26.3% discount rate. You can see it's highlighted there in the first line of the text box. I found it interesting that this 26.3% discount rate is the lowest rate since 2016. They could say what they like about financial aid's killing us. The master's candidates, PhD students do tend to get, as I was one, we tended to get tuition, everything paid for, but master's students certainly are the ones that are carrying a lot of the burden. All right, what I have here is the annual change in tuition revenue, enrollment, and the average tuition change. We don't know fiscal 23. We know what's happened to enrollment. We have a nice increase. We know what's happened to the price. We don't know the line green bar yet for 23, but given these two bars, we're going to have a nice increase in tuition revenue, at least a 5% increase in tuition revenue, or a $70 million increase in tuition revenue for the year that's just ending now. Pretty nice. And so what will this lead to? More positive excess cash flows, another solid increase in reserves. Okay, expenses. I have 4 different ways of breaking this down. I'm not going to go into all the detail on what we see, but there is some transparency issues that I do want to get at. So, dollar and percentage change in what's called the natural classification of expenses, where things are broken down. Natural classification is compensation, benefits, and everything else, basically. And you can see about 2/3 is compensation and 1/3 is everything else. And you can see I broke it down year by year. The last 4 years, we have data for. These are the dollar amounts that they're changing. Compensation, benefits, and all other costs. That sounds okay. But here's the transparency problem. Someone wrote earlier information on this. So I compared, so what Columbia puts in their audited statements, they combine compensation and benefits into one number. Next year, what's written in the chat, absolutely, tuition hike will likely, yes, there's no doubt that's true. So Columbia combines compensation and benefits when they reveal how much they pay in total to the employees. Brown, salaries and wages and employees and benefits are separate. You can see there, let me use my text box here. You can see when I'm boxing here for Brown and Harvard and Princeton and Yale, they report salaries separate from benefits. Columbia combines them. Penn does what Columbia does. But then they have all these other categories. Graduate student support for Brown, purchase services, supplies, utilities, interest depreciation, all these other categories. You can see Columbia has 2 categories of expenses, 2, compensation and benefits and all other. Harvard has 9. Brown has, and Princeton have 8. I'm not saying there's one right way or wrong way to do this, but clearly transparency is an issue at Columbia. When you put the numbers in fewer categories, you're just showing less. That's all it is. You're just revealing less information. That's all you're doing. Is this evil? Is this intentional? Are they just doing it the way they've always done it? Do they not care? You take your pick from all of the above. I'm not sure. I don't think there's an evil plan to be lack of transparency, but I think they just do what they've always done. But someone should show them this chart and say, you know what? Can't you show us a little more? Can't you show us what our peers are being seen so we can make an assessment on how the money is being spent here at Columbia? I almost said at Brown because we just did them 2 weeks ago. But there you go. Now, the functional expenses are a different way of breaking down the expenses. So natural expenses and function, just different ways of breaking down total expenses. Just bear with me a second. You see that number 5477975? That's the total expenses in 2022 for Columbia, broken down this way. If I come back up here, I get the same number, the natural expense classification, broken down just into two categories. The functional, we also have a similar problem with Columbia in the way they do this. They combine instruction and educational administration. No one else does this. That means that what they're doing is they're taking all the postdocs, all the part-time faculty, the full-time faculty. They're combining you guys with who? The academic deans, the associate deans, and all that. Now, I don't know how you guys feel about deans and associate deans. In most places, they're separate. They're considered separately. Columbia puts them all in together. And I understand that a lot of those deans, associate deans have faculty status. They're on the faculty. They're claimed to be faculty. However, if it was a union versus non-union world, they wouldn't be part of any bargaining unit. So this is just really something that shouldn't happen. This should not happen. I'm going to be frank and say this should not happen. And we're going to see it again when we look at the IPEDS data, the federal data. We'll see how it should. We'll see how different it is from the other schools. So it really makes this expense distribution and comparing it to other places almost, we can't really do it because this is so out of line. Putting instruction like this combined with education, it really is so out of line that it's hard to, and it distorts all the other categories. It's hard for us to see what's going on. It really is. And so anyway, this is still what we got. This is a graph of the different functional categories. They've only been reported by Columbia for the last 4 years. Nothing wrong with that. Then we look at the audit itself, and I try to compare comp and benefits for the different categories. What this is saying is that of all the compensation and benefits paid to every employee at Columbia, 45.9% of it went to people who teach and the people who supervise the people who teach. 13.6% went to research. About just under a third of it went for patient care. You see that patient care almost the same for 5 straight years. Didn't change much. Institutional support is them, completely them, all them, upper level, non-academic administration. And not changing. And auxiliaries, housing, dining, student union, bookstore, et cetera. But I still take all of this with a huge grain of salt because of the way this is combined. It's just not done. But they did it, and there's nothing we can do about it. And if we take out the hospital, they're saying that 2/3 of every compensation dollar goes to instruction and educational administration. Well, administration and instruction are not the same thing. They're just not. But that's the way they do it. So again, just bear with me here. These are the exact definitions in the glossary of IPEDS, the instructions that are given. My sources, every slide has a source of it. So these slides, you can see. If you want the raw data, I'm going to show you guys just to show you guys this document here that I'm showing you now on the screen. This is the raw IPEDS data. Let me go to the first page of it. This is finance in old 1920. They're all saying, we have the most recent one, only have one more recent year. This tells me, you can see how raw it is. but still we use it. This is the expenses and how much was spent on salaries and wages. This is the way the data comes at us. It's exactly how the data comes, and there's no, I'm not hiding any. That's exactly what the IPEDS data look like. The other source of data, since you ask, is the audited financial statements, which is this document here. And you can see it's a 49-page document, and it has all the financial statements and how everything is spent. So everything comes, most things come from the two documents I'm just showing you here, plus a lot of stuff from the website that the Columbia Office of Planning Institution and Research. So there's a lot of stuff there. But every slide, these should be sourced out. So you see where these things are coming from. Okay, number of employees. I have 3 different data sources here. I've got the Office of Planning and Institutional Research at Columbia, the bond data that Columbia sends to the bond rating agencies, and then the AAUP survey, which just came out about 3 weeks ago. The AAUP salary survey for 2023. So here we go. We're on slide 68. We're getting there toward the end. This is the percentage change in the number of full-time faculty from 2018 to 2023. Professor, associate, assistant, up 1.2%. Instructor, lecturer, 20.8%. This is the non-tenure track group mostly. And enrollment, non-medical enrollment, up 13%. So Columbia has mostly made an increase in enrollment with the hiring of non-tenure track faculty. And I was a non-tenure track faculty. I understand what this is. I understand the lack of security. I've been there. I know it. I lived it. So, and I know you live it. Those of you who are in that category. I know many of you are here today. The compensation is obviously less than full-time, and that's their motivation. But the lack of security, voice, academic freedom, and being an instructor or lecturer, I know it, I felt it. And it's just not the way it should be. A union would really help with those voice issues, if I could be so blunt, but that's again for another day. All right. Let me, some more charts here on the number of people. Change in full-time faculty per IPEDS. Again, IPEDS, just to get this out on the table, IPEDS is the integrated, and this is noted in the paper, but I want to put it out here, post-secondary education data system of the U.S. Department of Education. That's what IPEDS stands for. It's federal data. Any public or private university that gets any federal loan money has to submit their data to IPEDS. Finance data, enrollment data, graduation rate data, who works there data, all that stuff. And that's what this is. This is from the who works there. So non-tenure track faculty from 18 to 22 has increased 18%. Enrollment in this, not to 20, I only go to 22 here because IPEDS, I don't have 23 data, I only have through 22. So, but you can see enrollment still up almost 10%. Tenure track faculty down 7.2%. Tenure and tenure track faculty about even, tenured faculty up. Let me say this. I could say this because I certainly know what research schools are like. I've been to enough of them. A research university like Columbia cannot thrive, in my estimation, unless they hire new people. Tenure track faculty are new assistant professors who have on the tenure track. And to see this decline at a place like Columbia with a AAA bond rating is very disturbing. I am not unhappy about hiring more of this. This is great, but this should not be going down. What that tells me, and you guys can tell me if this is true or not. I don't live at Columbia, I don't work there. As people have retired, they're not all replaced. There's some replacement, a lot of replacement, but not total. And some of the replacement is done by non-tenure track. Some of the replacement is not done at all, not even by non-tenure track. And some they are replaced by full-time tenure track. So at a place like Columbia with $8 billion in unrestricted reserves, oh my God. That's all I can say to this. Oh my God, what are you doing? What is meant by tenure track? People who are either tenured, who currently have tenure, or people who are hired on the tenure track and do not. So tenure track are people who are eligible for tenure but don't have tenure yet. And yes, what is said in the chat just now, major shift in power is said, absolutely. That doesn't make it right, and this picture on slide 71 I show this picture every place I go, public, private, small, large. It doesn't make it right, though. Does it make it right? No, it doesn't make it right. But that's the way it is. Okay. A lot of different data sources and different. I want to just focus here on the grad students, and I know the postdocs. You maybe how you're categorizing iPads. I believe this is where you are. I believe the postdocs are in. Most of you are in the graduate research assistant, whether you're in the grad research in the non-medical category or the medical category. I believe that's where you are. I don't know that for sure, but I think you should ask as part of the negotiation, because I want to see this. So what I see in the grad teaching assistants, I see a significant decline over the last 5 years. Grad research assistants, I see an increase. And then part-time instructors, even a bigger increase. This is on the non-medical side. On the medical side, which is separate, you can see the numbers are smaller, but still we see solid increases in grad teaching, solid increases in grad research, and then an increase in part-time instructors on the medical side. So I don't know what your numbers are. You guys know what your numbers are better than me. When I'm negotiating, I want to make sure that what they're telling the federal government is what we have in our database as to who works for us and who's in our union. That's just me. So, okay. Who teaches the classes? Really instructive. This is just headcount, not credit hours. I understand that. It's not credit hours. It's not the same as that. However, still, more on 38% part-time faculty, 29.8% grad teaching, 22.1% tenure track, and 9.7% non-tenure track faculty. This pie chart speaks for itself, and I'll just not say anything more. It's pretty clear what it says. Number of employees. This is per iPads. There's a glossary here, which tells you who counts. What is the definition of these things? This glossary here will tell you the definition of this employment category. The largest employment category, congratulations, is what's called management. And the one that's growing the most in both number and percentage, congratulations again, is management. So they're the largest employment category of non-faculty, non-instructional employees, and they're growing the fastest. This is the definition of management. It should include those staff whose job it is to plan, direct, or coordinate policies, programs, and may include some supervision of other workers. That's what's classified as manager. The average salary of the management faculty, you can look of the management people, doesn't look that high because you have a lot of people who are maybe not high-level administrator, but certainly people who are managing somebody else. And these are the salaries of the other groups of non-instructional employees. And, well, that kind of speaks for itself as well. Percentage change management employees versus faculty employees, and everything else. So from 18 to 22, a 40% increase in the number of management employees, an 18% increase in non-tenure track, a 12% increase in part-time, about a 10% increase in enrollment, about a 1% increase in tenure track, and a 9% decrease in graduate assistant faculty. The administration may claim this is due to categorization differences, but IPED's reports are clear on what goes in each employment category. And I wrote up here, it's stark and alarming. There's been such an increase in management when compared to faculty, employees, and enrollment. It is, to be honest with you, my language should have been stronger. I'll just leave it at that. Okay, salaries. Let's just go to this picture here. Full and all ranks, full professors, obviously, and all ranks is everyone who's a full-time faculty member. All ranks is full-time. And inflation, you could see the purple line of inflation. The last 2 years, you could see inflation jumping up, and you guys' salaries not keeping up with inflation. And looking at the last 5 years, on average, taking a 5-year average, inflation over the last 5 years has averaged 3.5%. A little lower than the increases you've seen. There's 2 different peer groups that I was given to work with. So I had the Ivies and all others. I just saw, in some cases you'll see I put them all in one. In some cases I keep them separate. But that's how I went about doing this. So these peer groups, this is an obvious peer group, obviously. This peer group was suggested to me by the people who I arranged all this with. So I went with what you guys suggested, because that's what you guys suggested. So let's just go to it. Professors, Columbia is number 1. There's some Texas A&M and Michigan, especially Texas A&M, Yes, their endowment's about the same size as we'll see. But we lived in I taught at SMU in Dallas for 7 years. I get Texas A&M is not New York. Can I say that as a New Yorker? Am I allowed to say that without disparaging anybody? Yeah. All ranks, Columbia faculty also #1. However, there's good news for you guys. Don't worry. When I use what's called BEA, the Bureau of Economic Analysis, they do what's called regional price parity. The AAUP survey now does this. We have really smart people on the AAUP staff who are doing a great job with that survey. He's really good. And they really have done a great job at this, and it's in the AAUP data as well. So we adjust, when I do the adjustment for cost of living, here's a news flash, and this is why you guys paid me all this money. New York, it's more expensive to live in New York City than it is in Texas. You guys with me on that? Did anyone get to dispute that? No one's laughing at my jokes, which is okay. But Columbia moves to 4th from 1st when you consider Duke moves up because, well, Princeton, even Harvard moves a little ahead of Columbia when it comes to the all-rank people, but still pretty high. This comes from the most recent 990s. We don't have the 21 or the 22 990s, which would have the 20 and 21 years. These numbers are incredibly high on the face of them. And the increase in the mean and the median from one year to the next are also ridiculously high. The Columbia administration will say the following: when you put these numbers up against the other 7 Ivies, that's what they get paid. And the answer to that is yes. Having said that, oh my God, that's all I can say of this. That's a lot of money. So I didn't put people's names here. So you got former provost getting paid there, former executive vice president of arts and sciences. I mean, I'm a business professor. Do you see all the businessy titles these people got? Exec VP. Yeah. Last bit, peer analysis. So Columbia is bigger than the other 7 Ivy peers, is much more graduate heavy than the other Ivy peers. Biggest and most grad heavy. When you consider the other peers, not quite the top, but pretty close to the top when you include the other peers. Texas A&M is a lot bigger in terms of number of students. And NYU, obviously, NYU is also bigger. Endowment. A lot of you guys believe the endowment is a big factor in terms of who the peers are. I'm not so sure that's the only factor. To me, geography matters a lot. And anyway, here's the endowment of the, you can see middle, 5 out of 8. I guess, well, there's 8 Ivy League schools in total, 7 peers plus Columbia. So Columbia is a little lower. The peer average is dragged up by Harvard and Yale, but still. And these are the other peers, and Columbia is 7. So most of the other peers who are not Ivy peers have endowments that are smaller than Columbia's. And these are the people, this group, where I got this data from, this group, they have events where all the admins go together and they hang out together and they have fun. They share ways to screw employees. Yes, this is being recorded. I did say that. Okay, here's a graphic of the endowment. You can see in the middle. Here I combined all the peers. Columbia come in the middle. Tuition. Columbia, this is 22, not 23. I didn't have 23 data for all of them using iPads. So this is a 22 data. You guys are just below 80,000 then, broken up into tuition, fee, room, and board. Columbia, the highest tuition and fees, lowest room and board. I didn't like that. Second overall, and with the peers, again, the highest tuition and fees, 3rd overall. And here's a graph of that. Why are these two so different? They're public. U of M and Texas A&M are public universities. They have a state appropriation to support that supports them. Not much, but there's a state appropriation. Okay, now I'm only have 3 slides left, but I have to get this in. I complained before about Columbia combining instruction and academic support into one. you could see how different Columbia is in iPads. That file I show you, that finance file, that's the one I used to get the data you see here. And I used the most recent year we have in 21. This is saying that at Columbia, 67.9% of all the salaries paid to every employee, almost 2/3 of every salary dollar paid to all the employees went to instruction. Look at these percentages at the other 7 Ivies. It's nowhere close to that. Columbia combines this category with this category. Now they have a little bit in here, but look at the other Ivies with that category. It makes you say, I don't want to use bad language, but WTF, what are you doing? And why are you doing this? You see it right here. And I'm sorry to just bear with me here. This 67% is way out of line with the others, and this 2.5% is way out of line because Columbia takes all of this or most of it and puts it in here. No other school does that. Research, you can see Columbia in line, a little less. Public services so small, no, it doesn't matter much. Student services, Columbia, a little lower than average. Institutional support is administration, but to me, I don't trust that some of this money is not in here. I just don't trust it, the way they've done this. So it makes comparisons that Columbia can't say, oh, we spend more on instruction than the other Ivies. No, that's not accurate. That's just not the way this is. It's the way you categorize things. And I just don't like it. So there you go. Discount rates, yes, lower than 7th out of 8th. Columbia is more graduate-y. That's not a word, I just made it up, but more heavy on the graduate side. On the student, graduates make up a larger percentage of total students in Columbia than the peers, which is going to lead to a lower discount rate, but still, that's still on the low side. That's still on the low side. But the last slide is good news. The percentage of undergraduates was Pell Grants. Pell Grants is a federal program where the federal government pays for the tuition. It's family income based. And you can see Columbia has the largest percentage of 23. That means about 1/4 of your undergraduate students only. 1/4 of your undergraduate students, it says undergrad up here, per iPads as a source, are receiving Pell Grants as they're going to school right now at Columbia. That's not university aid, by the way. And that's another reason why they would say the discount rate's so low. We have so many Pell students, they're taken care of by the federal government. To some degree, they are. So, all right, that's it. I don't, given where I started and where I am now, I don't think I went that much over. So we still got time. So fire away with questions and comments. Anybody out there?
Hey, thank you so much, Howard, for that great presentation. That was absolutely fantastic and very educating. I think there's a lot of things that we need to process, but let's take a few questions via the chat. And we have 2 rooms, so both at the Morningside campus and the medical campus, which people might have questions to. So we'll use the chat options also for that.
So I'll just take the question. How does debt get calculated into this? Well, debt, let me try to answer that. Let me get to the slide here where I think I have debt. So if I can go to debt, where's my debt reserve? So just bear with me. I'm getting there, I promise. I'm not going to take that long. Here we go. So this is debt. Debt has interest attached to it. Okay. Love the jokes. I appreciate that. So debt service payments, principal and interest payments come out of. So they relate to the excess cash flows. So these excess cash flows right here, these 2 slides, debt service payments have to get paid out of this. They're a lot lower than this. You don't pay off the entire debt in 1 year. This is the total debt. The debt service payments are a fraction of this. And so does Columbia have too much debt? No, you can see the level of debt to reserves is not very high. And the amount of interest payments are very low when compared to this amount. So that's how debt figures into the process is, can they cover the debt payments for principal and interest at that $911 million? And the answer is clearly yes. So, but certainly relevant. All right, what's next?
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Howard?
you're fine. Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so I've got two small questions. So one is, how has Columbia University got a 911 million operating cash flow with only a 350 million operating surplus every year? How do you explain the difference in those two numbers? And
Okay.
then the second question is a little bit different, a totally different topic, but it's about those loans. Have you been able to see, with your experience in other universities, universities giving loans to their higher admin? Have you seen that in other universities too?
Okay, good. Let me start with the first question. So I take the operating surplus, I add non-cash expenses plus non-cash paper losses on investments equals I'll just say operating cash flows. So what I'm putting in the chat is the answer to your first question, which is, how do we get, why is one bigger than the other? And operating cash flows do not include, we don't have non-cash, we take out the non-cash expenses, and that's what we get to. And let me, you guys mind if I show you the raw data? Would you guys mind a little raw data? You guys gonna be bothered by that? Hopefully you won't. You okay with raw data? Yes. All right, here we go. So this is the audited statements. Here's the statement of cash flows. Sorry, I meant to use my text box. This is a $911 million net cash provided by operating activities. Boom. I don't have to do anything. Just read a number. This is the operating cash flows. Well, when you take actually that 350 million. So we take that's from the income statement. That includes non-cash depreciation. It's included in there. And we take out this thing here is taking out all those non-cash items, and that's where the numbers come from. So I'm showing a little behind the curtain stuff, sorry, but nothing wrong with a little behind the curtain stuff. The second question, loans to officers. The 990s, which is really what the 990s are good for. At the end of 990s, they talk about loans to administrators. And I've certainly seen that. I did look here. There was a couple of them. I didn't see anything significant but here there were, I think it was here, no, it was Brown, they weren't here, there were a bunch of them. And they're buried in they're not buried. They're at the back of the 990 and they list the administrators. The numbers weren't huge, but they weren't tiny either. A couple 100,000 here. Doesn't really say. My guess is that they're lending people money to buy houses, to buy housing. That's what I think they're doing. I could be wrong, but I think that's what they're doing to people who moved to New York City from a different area and look at the prices of a one-bedroom apartment and say, oh my God. I think that's what they're doing. Do I see it in other places? I didn't see it at Brown. So why didn't I see that at Brown? Don't take this the wrong way, Providence, but I don't think it costs as much money to live in Providence as it does in New York City. Again, don't take this. Why would an administrator have an income after leaving? These people who are coming into Columbia. Now, if they're leaving, look, in the 990, we saw all these former people getting paid all this money. The way I would answer that is they have employment contracts, and their employment contracts probably say, this is what happens when if I leave under these circumstances, this is what I get. Now, it's almost comical / farcical. How many of us have employment contracts say, if I take a job at another place, I'm going to get $350,000 on my way out? Did you see how many former admins were being paid here? You guys, the contracts, my answer, they have to entice people to come here with either loans to help them buy housing or promises that when you leave, this is what's going to happen. We're going to give you some money on the way out. They're not, okay, they're not buying a one bedroom. You guys are funny. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, they're not.
Okay.
I take
Is this like live?
All right. It made me laugh. I take it back. So anyway, go ahead. Next.
We have a question from Morningside Campus.
Hi, can you hear me?
Can you show us the slide with the payments to former admins again? Yes, I'm getting there slowly, apparently. Very slowly, but I am getting there. Here we go, right here. Former. So who are these former people getting paid $500,000, 800 million? Why are they getting paid this kind of money? I don't know why they're getting paid this kind of money. You guys, look, they sign contracts and maybe it's a bonus. I think we should, I want to know, if I were you, why are these former people getting paid? And you know what I want? You know what I really want? I want those 2 new 990s so I could build a time series over time so I can really see what's going on. So and by the way, the administration has those 990s. They're PDF documents. They have them. Look, I promise both people who paid me this, whatever you ask me from this point forward, there's no meter running. You don't owe me a cent more. What money is done. You guys ask me questions, I will answer them. You guys get those 990s? I'll make a new table for you at no charge. I'm not just saying that to be magnanimous. I will do it. Get me those 2 990s. I'll make you a new table, and we'll do the thing, and we'll figure out the price. I want to know why these people are getting paid so much. Who are these people? Were they that great? Were they that wonderful? I mean, maybe they were. Maybe they were that great. But
Howard, we have a question in Morningside campus.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. This is Michael Thaddeus. I'm a math professor on the Morningside campus. I have 2 comments to make first about your very last 2 slides, and then I do have a question. But the first thing is you pointed out that the number for instructional expenditure at Columbia is way out of line, and you said that that's because of it was lumped together with administrative expenditure, and I agree with that. But if you look at the article I wrote about the U.S. News reporting, I also document the fact that the site reporting, that Columbia is reporting a lot of clinical spending on patient care, also as an instructional expense. I'm guessing that Yale does the same thing, because if you look at the line for Yale in that chart, you see that 47.4 for them is under academic support. How can they be spending that much on academic support when we spend only 2.5%? It's because Yale also has this chain of clinics, and these are not hospitals, by the way. The hospitals at Columbia and Yale are structurally independent of the university. There are these chains of clinics at Columbia, it's called Columbia Doctors, and at Yale it's something else. And I think that there's some money that's inappropriately, in my view, lumped together with academic support.
I take the hospital out of this, by the way. If there's hospital spending, which it wasn't for Columbia and iPads, I take the hospital spending out of these percentages.
The hospital is not there, but there is still medical spending that's not hospital spending.
Yes, there is. And I agree with you. This here is also very, I think that's what you're pointing to. Is that right there?
About $1 billion annually. It's a very sizable fraction.
Yeah,
So
it is a huge amount of money.
Columbia and Yale should be called out on this. Why are they reporting these numbers, under mandatory reporting to the federal government, where it's, profoundly misrepresenting what they're doing with this money and how they function as academic institutions. It's extremely distortionary. And I've seen academic studies that refer to these wealthy universities spending all this money on instruction. Well, we're not spending it on instruction, we're spending it on patient care. So this is my first comment. The second is you pointed out that Columbia has this extremely high proportion of students with Pell Grants. That was your very last slide. And that is,
I wouldn't say extremely high. I said higher. I don't think this is extremely high. Where I work, it's about 40%. So I don't think it's extremely high compared to these peers, to this peer group.
It's high for a tier 1 private research institution. Yeah. The reason is because Columbia has a school called the School of General Studies, and it's a scandal that we have this school where admission standards are different and where the demographics of that school are very different. We have many more needy students, but financial aid is actually worse. For those students who are come from a lower socioeconomic background, we also give them less financial aid. And that's a scandal that everyone should be aware of. That's the reason that we're an outlier on this chart. Anyway, my question to you is, what evidence can be seen from the data in the consolidated financial statements and so on that Columbia is trying to accumulate capital reserves for some capital spending project? We seem to have some big capital spending projects underway at the moment. Columbia is building a 34-story building on 125th Street on Broadway. No one she said, no, where the money is coming from for that. So can you see any sign that capital?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it, just bear with me. I think let me try to answer that because I think it's pretty it's a very relevant question. When I come to this slide, I was surprised. Okay, I'm on slide 8 here. Usually, when I see this, I'm going to put my glass on. I want to make sure I get the numbers right. Land, buildings, and equipment have gone from 4 billion to 5 billion in 7 years. That's not a very large increase at all, to be honest with you. And over that time, reserves have gone up significantly more than that. And assets and the endowment, everything's gone up a lot more than that. They've also borrowed, for a place that has all this money, they've also been borrowing money. They don't have heavy borrowing, but still, if I can get to the debt chart here, I think the debt level, even at 2 billion, is kind of high considering how much flexibility they have. So so you asked me, do I see evidence? Here's what I'm seeing. I see a very small growth in land and buildings. Now, obviously, there's restrictions in Manhattan on how much you could build and where you could build, but still, I see a fairly decent level of debt for a place that doesn't need to be borrowing any money. I think they are saying to themselves, we are going to stop borrowing money. We've got to freshen up we need new stuff. We have not had that many new, from what I see through the end of 22. I'm not on your campus, but through the end of 22, I don't see tremendous additions. We want new stuff. And in order to get that new stuff, we're going to need a lot of money to do so. So this build up in cash flows and reserves, along with they're saying, we're not borrowing any more money. We got to have new stuff. We're going to use our reserves to start getting some new money, and maybe have a capital campaign. They always have capital campaigns. But I definitely see that. I think your intuition, I'm not just saying this to be nice, I think your intuition is spot on. I was surprised that a place like this is not building more. Why are they not? Where are the new buildings? They have all this money, this big and down. Where are the new buildings? You guys are donors who give you a lot of money. Where's the new buildings coming? 4 billion to 5 billion over 7 years, to be honest with you, that's not a huge increase. Something must be in the works. So I agree with that assessment.
We have a questions by Jess Restschaffer. I think who raised their hands a couple of times.
Go ahead.
Jess, can you hear us?
I don't see any hand raised, but I'm sorry about that. Someone says there's a ton of construction in Manhattan County is possible those not be. Yeah, if I only have through 6/30/22, construction in progress will be in there, but typically it takes time for that money to wind up in the audited statements. The year ending 6/20/23, we should see more of that. But Jess, are you there? If you want to, Jess, could you ask a question? You put it in the chat. I don't see it in the chat. No? Okay. Sorry about that.
Well,
I apologize for that.
and then one question was also raised, which was a lot of people actually rent from Columbia. So it goes from our salary to back in Columbia's pocket.
Yeah,
but there's no way to see that, right?
Well, okay. Let's talk about that. So, at the University of Chicago, where I went to school, where I went to grad school, and the grad student union there, one of our big things is we have proven that the university there is really like a real estate company, as much as they are a university. And so I'm on slide 8 again. I'm going to put my glasses on. Sorry. You guys see this category called institutional real estate? Does everyone see that? Hello? You guys with me? You guys see where my cursor is?
Yes, we can.
Okay. There's $1 billion of it. That to me are these apartments, etc., that they own. Now, from what you're saying to me, Laureline, is that people are paying rent. This is apartments that are owned by Columbia that people are paying rent to. The rental income is part of income, but here you could see they've got $1 billion of real estate that they own. I understand New York City is not a cheap place, but so someone write, Mass new construction next year, 5 more new buildings, including new business cards. Sounds like you're not seeing that in the numbers yet. Yeah, that we'll get there. It will get there. But when you look at land, buildings, and equipment, you can see from 20 to 21, nothing. I got nothing. Remember, every year things decline in value, and there's new stuff. I haven't seen that big increase yet. I haven't seen a big increase in what you guys are saying. Columbia was recently named the largest private landlord. Yeah, they've got $1 billion. $1 billion. It's hard for me to explain this. $1 billion is a lot of money. I know you guys may not think so, but $1 billion, it's not $1 million. It's a B. That's with a B. That's one with a B. That's not just one apartment building. It's just a lot of money. And so largest private, that's unbelievable. We're rent controlled in this, and that's not tax deductible. Columbia is a nonprofit corporation and nonprofit organization. So they are not paying tax on the surplus. Someone asked about the cash surplus or whatever the surplus is. When you're a nonprofit, you do not have to pay tax on the difference between your revenues and expenses. That's the big advantage of being a tax-exempt organization, which Columbia is. Now, I can tell you the graduates in Chicago, they believe that the university, for that part of their university, should not be tax-exempt. And there is, even for selling of T-shirts, they're supposed to pay they're supposed to file what's called a 990T, which is the IRS where you're supposed to pay tax because you're competing with others. And so the real estate stuff, it's possible they're paying tax on the profits, though I doubt it. No, I sincerely doubt it. So let me see it in the chat. How does revenue from real estate factor into the financial? It's my understanding real estate is managed by a different nonprofit. So we kind of just, here's, they got $1 billion in real estate assets. When I look at the revenue distribution, for Columbia, which I have here, I'm not seeing a separate category for that. They could bury it in any of these categories here. Is it a separate legal entity that's not part of Columbia? Possible, but I doubt it. I think the rental income that they're generating is somewhere in these categories here. I don't know where, but I think it's somewhere here. So, but it's hard to know. All right, anything else you guys got for me?
So you got a few more.
I meant one thing. I meant when I said, anyone here, you don't have to go through. You could just. I'm easy to find. My email's out there to find. You can just send me a question. I will answer it. I will. I'm not. And there's no meter running, so you could ask me whatever you want. That's.
Thank
you guys in bargaining. For you guys in bargaining, I have a lot of thoughts on how I can help you, but you guys got to ask me. That's all I can say.
Oh, we will. We are now.
All right. What else you guys got?
I think there's a few questions in the chat. And there's Bill who's asked a question.
So there's a question in the chat about gifts. So right here in this category, private gifts, grants, and contracts, this is all we got. They combine what's called private. I mean, you can see it. I didn't make this category. They made the category. Private gifts are in here. You can see along with private grants and private contracts. It's hard to know how much they're collecting from that. And I think I tried to get at, which I didn't, I think I glossed over it, but let me see if I can get at something else just to show you that from the endowment. Okay, so in the 990, there's some statistics on new gifts to the endowment, and then the annual endowment spending, and then the contributions. So there's two different things in the 990, and then there's the $400 and something million of private gifts, grants, and contracts, and then there's the fundraising expenses. So let me just stay with this for a bit. It's hard to know exactly how much private gift is, how much private money they're receiving, but there's three different numbers we're given. We're given new gifts per the audit. We're given gifts, grants, and contracts together per the audit, and the 990 is telling us how much there is in contributions. In addition, the 990 is telling us, okay, in 20, the last year we have data, they took in $400 million of contributions. They spent $125 million in fundraising expenses. That means it costs them 31 cents to raise a dollar. Anything above, sorry, let me get my text out. Anything above 20 cents is high. That means they're spending on average for the last 5 years 36 cents to raise $1. That means they're paying their the development people quite a bit of money. Is what that is, because that's mostly salary. But this is so in terms of the gift giving, those are the numbers that we have for that, and they're all reported here and in the revenue slide overall. And this is from the 990 and the revenue slide here on page 17.
So we got a couple more questions. One was for Bill, was regarded whether the real estate is managed separately. And that's one of the reasons that could be brought forward by Columbia as why this money is not available for providing any kind of services.
I doubt it's
to us.
separate. I don't know for sure, but I doubt that if they're charging graduate students to live in their dorms, I think it's in these statements. I do.
Okay. Another question is whether there's an increase from 800 to 1 billion in real estate, institutional real estate, whether that growth is explained by increase in valuation, or if that growth is because they bought more of the neighborhood.
That's a really good question. So let me talk about that's you should take my accounting class. It's a good question right there. So the way we do accounting, I'm sorry, remember this is asked by somebody. This is not me bringing it up. So here we go. So the way we do accounting, I'm boxing the 800 million to $1 billion increase. The valuation, the market value of properties is obviously very high in New York, and it goes up a lot. These statements do not reflect changes in market value. What goes on these balance sheets, this is from the balance sheet, is the actual cost, what it costs them to build it. So if the market value of these properties has shot up tremendously, we're not going to see it here. If the market value went down, we would see it here. Just think about what accounting does and why none of you are accountants. When things look really good, when the market takes off and real estate gets more valuable, we don't say anything about it. We don't tell you about it. But when things go bad, we tell you about it. We're the most negative people on the planet Earth. But that's the way the accounting is. But I can guarantee you, as a New Yorker, from 2016 to 2022, there is no doubt that the value of those real estate holdings, the market value, is a lot higher than what you see here. This $1 billion is the cost to Columbia when it was built, less any depreciation on that. Joseph has his hand up.
Mm-hmm, exactly. Next person.
Thanks, Sarah. This is extraordinarily illuminating. I'm not sure how to phrase this question because I'm keenly aware of my ignorance, but it's really a question for your perspective on having done this in a number of institutions. I'm in the College of Arts and Sciences, and often when the administration deigns to give us a presentation about the budget, they only talk to us about the budget of our unit, right? Our school or something like that. And if we try to ask questions about like the overall assets of the university or cash flows between parts of the university, we're basically told, no, look, that's not money that we have here in arts and sciences. Our school only has so many resources. So what advice do you have because you've given us an analysis based on these publicly available data that describe the institution as a whole. Do you have any advice on thinking about the relationship between this perspective that you've given us and any given part of the university where we might be told, well, yes, the university may have X amount of money, but actually, our school is very poor or something like that. Do you see what I'm asking?
It's such an important question. The reason why it's so important is that's how you, as faculty and postdocs, that's where you live. That's the information you're given. This is how I address it. First of all, to assess the financial health of Columbia University, we have to look at the entire university itself, not just the College of Arts and Sciences. That's number one. Number two, trying to say the College of Arts and Sciences is over here. And when you look at us separately, we're really not doing that well. And we really just can't afford more than a 2.5% raise for the faculty in our college this year. That's the most we can do. That, in someone's mind, that may be true, but the way costs are allocated, they can make that look any way they want. Look, you've got to take the cost of the president, the provost, and that has to be allocated to all the different colleges. You've got to take the utilities. You've got to take depreciation. You've got to take cutting the grass. That all has to be allocated to the different colleges. Well, how is that possibly done? There's no way it's done in a systematic way that makes any sense. And to say that the College of Arts and Sciences is a profit center by itself different from the College of Business, different from the College of Engineering, different from what's going on in Manhattanville. That makes no sense. Columbia is one university. These audited statements are the whole thing. And I understand what you're getting in budget meetings is snippets. And by the way, not only are you getting a snippet of the university's financial situation, the budget itself is not reflecting all the revenues and expenses that really are associated with the College of Arts and Sciences, because it's very difficult to allocate revenues that are for the whole university. And plus, if a student is in arts and sciences and they're taking a class in engineering or they're taking a class in business, well, how does that revenue get allocated? They make that all up as they go along. There's no way to take the College of Arts and Sciences and say, we have this budget and that's it. I think you could do it on the salary side. You can look at salaries and that's fine with the people that work in arts and sciences, but trying to allocate the whole thing makes no sense at all. And to me, the only way to assess the ability of Columbia University to give raises to the faculty in arts and sciences is to assess the financial health of the entire university as a whole. That's my belief. And I think you keep pushing back at them. You keep pushing. Now, they're never good. Look, I don't think they're going to look at these spreadsheets and swoon and say, oh, you know, we didn't really know this Bunsis guy may have something. Right. Like that's going to happen. Not a chance is that going to happen. They're not going to change what they give you in those budget meetings, and they're not going to change their thoughts. However, you guys keep pushing. Eventually, you are going to change the conversation. You're going to change the conversation away from arts and sciences has no money. Arts and sciences is separate to the university as a whole has $900 million in excess cash flows, has $8 billion in unrestricted reserves. Maybe things are a little different than what you say. This AAA bond rating is not the AAA bond rating of some other entity that has nothing to do with arts and sciences. Arts and sciences is part of Columbia University. And arts and sciences is part of a university that has a AAA bond rating because they generate almost $1 billion in excess cash flows every year, and because they have $8 billion in reserves. And you keep pushing on it, and you keep saying, I want to discuss why we're not getting more raises when this university has these kind of reserves and cash flows. They're never going to agree with you, but eventually you keep consistent on this. And the last thing I want to say to you guys, if they talk about budget cuts, all they want from you is, let's talk about what we can cut. If I'm you, and I'm not just saying this, you can say, oh, it's easy for me to say. Well, I've been out there and I've been, I've taken every shot and arrow there is to take. Don't ever get in a room with them and tell them, you know what, I think we should cut this program and maybe that program, and we need they don't need to be cutting anything except admin. You'll get in a room and they say, okay, you want to talk about cutting admin? We'll be in a room with you. There's no staff people being cut. None. There's no reason to cut any staff or programs at Columbia. Enrollment is doing unbelievably well. Everything else is doing unbelievably well. There's no reason to cut anything. So you should never, ever, ever get in a room with these people and say, let's talk about what to cut. If they say that, let's talk about it. Oh, if you don't get in a room with us, we're just going to cut whatever we want. They're going to cut whatever they want anyway. They're going to do it anyway. Just don't give them the cover they're looking for. That's what they want in you. And you're going to change the conversation. And eventually, at the AAUP chapter and the postdoc union through negotiations, it doesn't happen overnight. But if you guys stay organized, act like a union, the union that is a union, acting like a union, you guys stay together and stay firm, it's going to change. You're going to affect change, though it doesn't happen overnight and it does take time. But for the AUP, I'm going to say this, you guys started, I don't know how many members you got. I think you got a pretty decent chapter. Let's just get more people together. You're going to have more of a voice and have more of an effect if there's more people together. And I promise you, it's the dues money is money well spent. And I promise you, the people who run our organization, we are not admin heavy at all. There's hardly any staff. I know every single staff member that works there. I know every one of them, and there's not that many of them. I promise you that. There's not that many of them. And the cost to run that place, they run a shoestring operation, but their hearts are right there. So please join AUP. It goes to you postdocs too. You guys can join us too for a low price. Just saying.
Well, and some of us are directly concerned. Thank you so much, Howard, for that fabulous speech. That was very.
Sorry.
No, that's fantastic. I think we are slowly ready to close that Q&A section.
Okay.
Is there anyone else that has any concluding issue after this fiery speech?
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Otherwise, like, I think we need to clap you as much as we
Thank you.
can.
Appreciate that. I'll leave. But seriously, you guys, and I will also say this to everyone: if the admin comes back with a statement, this Bunsis guy doesn't know what he's talking about, but I will respond. I'm not going to take it personally. I'm not going to be bothered if they say anything about me personally, or I don't know what I'm doing. They say whatever they want. It won't bother me. All I want to do is help you guys, and I'll help you guys write any response that you see fit, and I'll do that. And again, there's no meter running, no more. We're done. You know, payment is done, and but I'm still with you guys. You guys got me for life. That's it. You're stuck with me. So, all right, guys,
Well,
take care.
Never be able to thank you enough. Really, that was formidable, and your wealth of knowledge, and a formidable speaker. And as much as we'd like to say,
what? Let's go, Knicks.
Yeah, that's
Come on.